All right, are we on? Yes, we are. Good. Thank you for attending. Today is Tuesday, November 13, 2018 at 6:05 p.m. My apologies again for running a little late. We had a longer finance meeting tonight. We'll begin tonight's proceedings with the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please press.
That's what I wondered.
Please press yes to take roll call.
And then I have two proclamations to start tonight, but then also a little something I'd like to say. And it is a very, very big agenda tonight. I know we have a number of people registered, and usually in the past I'll let it go over a little 3 minutes. Tonight I cannot, so I apologize to you in advance, but we'll get started. So, first off, I'd like to recognize the entire city clerk's office staff for everything that they did during the recent election process, both in handling the record amount of residents in early voting, the registration and setup of polling places, and all the detailed work completed before and the day of the election. All of this done while still completing their regular duties. A sincere thank you and a job well done to our city clerk, Tony Rayola, and her staff, Ashley Klein, Jennifer Krivishine, Leah Wild, Mary Gady, Peggy Steinke, Sarah Marquardt, and Bonnie Peterson. I truly appreciate all of you and what you all accomplished during this very busy record election process. Thank you for the excellent service and the extra effort given to our residents during this time. Well done.
Thank you.
Now, also tonight, in honor of Veterans Day, I would like to recognize and say thank you to numerous city staff that are veterans, but also to say thank you to the following council members and staff who serve the city of Wausau, and also say thank you for their service given in defending and serving our great country by their participation in the armed forces of the United States. To these veterans and all veterans, I, along with the grateful city and nation, truly appreciate your efforts. From the City Council, Mr. Dennis Smith, a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, and is also a veteran of the Vietnam conflict. To Mr. David Nunning, also a veteran of the United States Army. And from our staff, Mr. Eric Littman of the U.S. Army. He's a one officer. I don't know if I'd say a gentleman, but just the same, the officer in our bunch. You know I'm kidding. To these veterans, I thank all of you for having both served the city of Wausau and also the United States of America.
It should also be noted that the mayor is also a veteran and served in the Mideast, I believe.
A proclamation tonight. Whereas throughout our history, loyal citizens from every corner of America have willingly assumed the duty of military life in conflicts worldwide to ensure the citizens of the United States a life of democracy and freedom. And we salute the members of the armed forces who are confronting our adversaries abroad, and we honor the men and women who left America's shores but did not live to be thanked as veterans. Gets me every year. They will always be remembered by our country. And today our veterans inspire new generations of Americans as we work to defeat terrorism and advance peace throughout the world. And in respect for and recognition of the contributions our servicemen and women have made to the cause of peace and freedom worldwide, we celebrate Veterans Day. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Robert B. Mielke, Mayor of the great city of Wausau, do hereby encourage all citizens of the community to participate in patriotic activities 2 days ago on November 11, 2018, and celebrate Veterans Day and to recognize the valor and the sacrifice of all United States veterans. Also tonight, it is Small Business Saturday. Whereas the government of the city of Wausau celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and the community, according to the United States Small Business Administration, there are currently 30.2 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all businesses with employees in the United States, are responsible for 65.9% of net new jobs created from 2000 to 2017, and small businesses employ 47.5% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, and 90% of all consumers in the United States say Small Business Saturday has had a positive impact on their community, and 89% of the consumers who are aware of Small Business Saturday said day encourage them to shop small all year long. And 73% of the consumers who reportedly shop small and independently owned retailers and restaurants and Small Business Saturday did so with friends or family. And the City of Wausau, Wisconsin supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now, therefore, I, Robert B. Melke, Mayor of the City of Wausau, do hereby proclaim November 24, 2018 as Small Business Saturday, and I urge all the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. Okay, again, we've got a pretty lengthy agenda tonight and numerous people that wish to speak. So, when your name is called forward, please come forward to speak. I ask that you give your name and your address. And respectfully, I will have to hold it to 3 minutes even tonight. So, starting off, please, with Mr. Chris Norfleet.
How you doing? My name is Chris Norfleet. I live at 719 Bertha Street. I believe most of you, or at least a handful of you, know who I am. The basic principle is that you stood in front of that flag at the beginning of this, and we spoke of injustice for all. And we've seen some issues arise in this community. Me and you have talked about these issues and about the shining the light on these issues. And that as a community, we've seen over and over again the inability of officials to be leaders, accountable and responsible for the society and the community that we all inhabit. And without a doubt, when it comes to ethnicity, there are issues in this community that we should not run from, but take head on. For we have seen blackface. We've seen children raising their hands and gestures as if they are in unity with that Hitlerite type mentality. We've seen people disgruntled as officials within this very city. And we are asking that this changes. I've talked to you about town halls. I've talked to many of you about being not complicit with not addressing what we find as ethnic people to be an issue. This cannot be a matter of majority based equal to minority. Just because we're not the majority does not mean that we should not count as citizens. The quality of our lives depend upon equality itself. For if we move forward with pushing things under the rug when it comes to social injustice, it is no different than domestic abuse. It's no different than the opioid issue. Hate is a real issue. So is ethnic bias. It is real. It's here. Let's confront it as one community. We can't afford to sweep it under the rug. We look for leaderships in you. We cannot allow you not to be accountable and responsible for these type of issues. I don't mind the majority of white people finding Wausau to be great. But you have to take into consideration those who do not find it to be so great. And you must adjust yourself to know why others are not finding this to be so great. Wausau is still good, even though you know you have opioids. Wausau is still good, even though you have domestic abuse.
Mr. Norfleet, my apologies, your time is...
Let me just finish this one thing. No matter what, the consistency that I am, you will not be able to avoid this conversation. Thank you.
Next up, please, Kyle Lowe.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Kalo, and I live at 724 Park Avenue. When I signed up to speak, I kind of didn't know what to say, but I want to be very specific, and I did not want to be abstract at all. So I really want to, I'm really here to speak for my friend Mary and my city council member Mary. Even though she does not represent my district, she represents the Hmong community. And myself as a county board member in District 5, I don't ever say that I speak for the Hmong community. I really don't think that I'm a voice for the Hmong community, but I feel in this respect I do, and I am. Being the first elected Hmong woman to be elected on the county board, I'm very proud of that. Because I represent the Hmong community in that respect. And I think it is disrespectful for everyone to not give Mary her constitutional right to ask for a roll call vote. And I've heard over and over again that stories have changed. People don't remember what happened. I think that's unacceptable. With the number of you, I mean, someone has to remember something that matches up with Mary's story. I mean, there are two stories here, and so obviously someone is straying from the truth. And that is disrespectful to the Hmong community, because we have made great strides in this community. We contribute to this community. And I've heard over and over again from Mr. Milky that you respect our community and you love our community. And I heard you say at the Hmong New Year that you wish there to be kindness in our community. And I agree with you too, but kindness is about respect. Kindness is about giving us the dignity that we deserve, that we're asking for, and to be treated equally, just like everyone else, whether we are leaders of the community, whether we are peers of each other. All I ask is to give Mary what she's asking for, and that's in turn giving the Hmong community that also. So my second reason why I'm here also is I'm a member of Citizens for Clean Wausau, and we asked very early on to put our subject on the agenda, and it was rejected. And I think we have major concerns about the pollution that's going on in 3M. And so, you know, it's just
You are at
another.
3 minutes, just to let you know.
Thank you. Let me finish this. I think it's just another example of pushing citizens to the side and not wanting to listen to what we have to say. So this, you haven't been doing a good job, and I'm disappointed along with everyone else in the city. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lou Larson.
Good evening. My name is Lou Larson. I live at 904 South 21st Place. I am also here in regards to Mary Tao. I am a resident in her district, and I find it disturbing that something that went on behind closed doors. I don't know what went on behind closed doors. I can only go by what I read in the newspaper, and I find it disheartening that my representative is being bullied or not listening to by other council members. Like I said, I wasn't in the room. I'm just going by what I had heard. I voted for Mary. I support Mary. I voted for her so she can bring more transparency to this community, and so she can also bring more financial rein to the financial doings that's running this city into the ground. And with that, I'll just leave it at that and say I'm very disheartened that something like this happened and made the newspaper, and I hope that you respect all and will learn to work all together in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Brad Carter.
Brad Carter, 1436 Sumner Street, 2nd District. I'd like to take just a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about the Mary Tao situation. I've already talked to the mayor and Alderman Pat Peckham about the situation, and here's what I have to say. I don't have any magic for you. There's not going to be magic. Here's what I do think, though. One, it is a big thing to have among aldermen, and that it brings communication from a perspective of the community that you wouldn't get any other way, and we need to keep that as an asset to the committee. I don't know how you solve a problem when one person perceives things so differently than the others in the same leadership group, but I know it doesn't get resolved without honest communication. There's no single leader of the Hmong community, but in Wausau, Mary is one of the leaders of the Hmong community, and if you can't repair your relationship with her, I fear that you may have strained relationships with other people in that community and other minority communities. I think it's likely that a solution can be found where nobody has to be wrong. Your best path forward is to get an unbiased mediator without any decision-making power who helps those involved better understand each other's point of view, overcome conflict, and work towards better relationships. All this will require some investment of time and funds. Both are limited resources, and I encourage you to make the investments necessary so that you can make progress on this thorny issue. Doing nothing is always an option, but let's just say that you do choose to do nothing and Mary resigns from the city council. Where does that put you? Where does that put us? This is the city I live in and the city I work for, and I think that if it requires investment, if it requires rethinking what everyone has said and done, and if it requires a commitment to go forward, I think that will be in the city's interest and all of your individual interests too. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Katie Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Katie Rosenberg, and I live at 1706 Emmer Street in Wausau. I'm here tonight for one reason, because I know that if the situation were reversed, City Council Alder Mary Tao would show up and support me no matter what. I want to note how uncomfortable this is for me, and I know it is for you too. But when I read her quotes about feeling bullied, it made me very sad. She is a friend, and I respect her leadership. I know that many of you read those quotes too and felt confused. I know that because I had productive and authentic conversations with both Alder Pat Peckham and Alder Tom Neal about this situation. Thank you. But I also want to note that Mary is uncomfortable right now too. She's telling us that, and she's telling you that. I know that this is a tough position to be in. There's a lot of work to take care of, and I know that every single one of you ran for office and continue your careers in public service because you believe in the good that government can accomplish. I hope that means that the city can work towards a resolution with an emphasis on equity. None of us can change what happened over the course of months to get us where we are, but each and every one of us has the opportunity to change the trajectory of the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. James Straub.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is James Straub. I live at 5601 Sherman Street. I was here just a week ago or so asking for a nativity scene to be displayed in the 400 block. I was rejected at that time by the park department or the park representatives for fear of legal action. There should be no fear of legal action in this situation. The law firm of Thomas More Society out of Chicago has resolved all of the legal issues in this situation. For instance, almost all state capitals in the United States have a nativity display. Where there was problems, the Thomas More Legal Society settled them. So that should not be an issue anymore. It's just a simple request. I can't understand why it has to get so complicated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Mitch Vigoot.
Just wanted to mention Mitch would address the committee or council at a future date.
Okay, thank you. Mr. John Robinson.
My name is John Robinson. I live at 1226 Highland Court, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide comments on the 2019 budget. I'm here tonight to urge you to support the action that was taken by the Parks and Recreation Committee as it relates to access to the city's pools. As a long proponent of ensuring access to our pools, I realize it is an important role that the pools play in providing swim lessons and recreational opportunities for our youth and our families. Growing up in the southeast side as one of 8 children with a father who was regularly unemployed or underemployed during the summer, we were able to take swimming lessons and use free swim in the pools on a regular basis. There were, however, many times where we could not access the pools because of the minimal fees that were charged, and while our friends did. The pools provided and continue to provide a safe place to learn how to swim, to develop those skills, and to provide recreational opportunities for our youth and their families. And they ought to be continued because it's done in a safe and supported and supervised manner. I encourage you to support the recommendations of the Parks and Recreation Committee, although I would like to see it go farther than that. I realize that there are budgetary issues associated with levy limits and decreased state aids and other needs in the city. It's a difficult time for you to do that, but I think that the proposal put forth in the Parks and Recreation Committee to expand the free swimming to from Wednesday to Thursday nights and to establish a schedule for Sundays is a start in the right direction, and would encourage you to look at the opportunities to seek funding from other sources to expand those services in the future. So I encourage you again to support the recommendations of the Park and Recreation Committee, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Phil Salamone.
Hello again. My name is Phil Salamone. I live at 321 Lincoln Avenue in Wausau. And as I've mentioned before, and this might come up in my talk, I was a union rep here for 20 years, retiring around 2005. I am also, like John, I like-minded on both things. I think option one is the one I support. I'd like better. I've been advocating for free pools, and I still much like to see that. I know I can't make a motion. But I also applaud and this kind of comes up into the conversation, applaud the, I watch these things, the pay raises you awarded to city employees, and that I appreciate what you did there. It exceeded the cost of living, and it exceeded even what the county was given. But I urge you, this is not that much money, and that's my point. Far less than anything that anything it costed in pay raises. $60,000 for the whole year for free pools. My sense of it, as I've been involved in this issue, is that it's not about money. There's other issues going on. I'm not sure what they are. I'd rather not get into them. But in any event, I would support, like I said, the Parks and Rec proposal, and that I would like to see, another proposal for free pools. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Tom Killian, please.
Good evening, and Mr. Mayor, Lou's just going to pass that out as we had discussed in the email string. Good evening. My name is Tom Killian. I live at 133 East Thomas Street. I'm a volunteer member of Citizens for a Clean Wausau, and we have a letter tonight that was written to the group in care of myself by prominent Harvard-trained toxicologist Stephen Lester. We're going to enter that into the record, please. November 2nd, 2018. Dear Mr. Killian, at your request, I have reviewed the State of Wisconsin Department of Health Services letter report written to the Honorable Patrick Peckham, City Council Alderman District 1, Wausau, by Clara Zhang, toxicologist, Bureau of Environmental and Occupational Health, Wisconsin Department of Health Services, dated August 20th, 2018. This letter addresses the Wausau Riverside Park dioxin contamination and includes an evaluation and risk assessment of soil sample results collected from the Thomas Street neighborhood that were analyzed for dioxin. Before addressing my concerns about this report, I thought it would be helpful to include some background on my experience in assessing the public health risks posed by dioxin. I have participated in the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's activities on dioxin since 1994 and have reviewed and submitted comments on the draft health assessment documents multiple times and on drafts reviewed by the EPA's Science Advisory Board and a committee of the National Academy of Sciences. I have substantially contributed to 2 significant reports on dioxin, Dying from Dioxin, published in 1995, and the American People's Report on Dioxin, published in 1999, and have presented papers on dioxin at scientific conferences. In my capacity as science director at CHEJ, I have worked with hundreds of grassroots communities where exposure to dioxin was a major concern. These communities include Superfund sites in Jacksonville and Pensacola, Lock Haven, Columbia, Jacksonville, and Times Beach, Missouri, and Love Canal in Niagara Falls, New York. I have devoted a good portion of my career to evaluating the public health risks resulting from exposure to dioxin. The Department of Health Services concluded in this letter report that there is no apparent health hazard for people using the Riverside Park and residents living in the Thomas Street neighborhood due to dioxin soil contamination. I could not disagree more with this conclusion. Second page.
Ms. Terry Killian, then, please. Name and address, please, for the record.
Terry Killian, 133 East Thomas Street, Wausau. My reasons are described below. 1. First and most importantly, the risk calculations and analysis conducted by the Wisconsin DHS failed to consider the cancer risk posed by exposure to dioxins. The Wisconsin DHS risk analysis was based only on the non-cancer risks posed by exposure to dioxin. The risk of developing cancer is the most dominant and important risk posed by exposure to dioxin. No risk assessment of dioxin exposure would be complete without it. It is completely mystifying to me how the state DHS could assess and evaluate the public health risks posed by dioxin levels in soil without including the potential cancer risk. This is important because dioxin is generally considered the most potent man-made carcinogen ever tested. Dioxin has been classified as a human carcinogen by the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer, the most prestigious cancer research and risk assessment agency in the world, and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services National Toxicology Program. The human epidemiological evidence provides consistent findings of increased risk for all cancers combined and lung cancer in occupational studies, as well as evidence of tissue-specific increases in cancer. Increased mortality from soft tissue sarcomas and all cancers among workers exposed to dioxin has also been reported. The Wisconsin DHS letter report does acknowledge that the WHO has determined that TCDD, the most toxic form of the dioxin group, is a human carcinogen. However, the risk assessment fails to include any cancer risk analysis. In fact, there is no there is no discussion at all about the potential cancer risks posed by dioxin in this letter report. Even the section on limitations of the risk assessment fails to mention anything about the failure to consider the potential cancer risk. On this basis alone, the risk analysis conducted by the Wisconsin DHS is inadequate and incomplete.
Ms. Joyce Lidke.
Thank you. The U.S. EPA uses the cancer risk posed by exposure to dioxin as the basis for setting its regional screening level for all cancer-causing chemicals, including dioxin. The RSL is a guidance value for evaluating contamination in soil. This approach is consistent with but most states use to generate soil cleanup guidance values or action levels. In a review of state soil cleanup levels of dioxin, EPA found that 23 states use cancer risk as the basis for establishing unrestricted residential cleanup values for dioxin in soil. 12 of these states used a 1 in a million cancer risk value as the target cleanup goal. These cleanup values range from a low of 4 parts per trillion to a high of 19 parts per trillion. The mean value was 7.18 parts per trillion. 8 of these states used a 1 in 100,000 cancer risk value as the target cleanup goal, with levels ranging from 20 ppt to 120 ppt. The mean was 61.1 parts per trillion. A 1 in a million cancer risk value is the generally accepted target cancer risk used for calculating cancer risk posed by toxic chemicals. The 24 states did not have a cleanup level for dioxin in soil. The Wisconsin DHS used the second highest concentration of dioxin in soil among the samples considered in its non-cancer risk calculation and assessment of dioxin in soil. No explanation is given for why this choice was made. The report only states that the dioxin level from the culvert outfall was used for calculation. When calculating the non-cancer risk for ingesting dioxin-contaminated soil in Thomas and River Street neighborhoods, the highest level of dioxin detected in the residential areas was used. For consistency, the highest level of dioxin detected should have been used in both calculations. That was not done. It is standard risk assessment practice to use a worst-case scenario in order to compensate for the many uncertainties inherent in the risk assessment calculations. Thank you.
Joyce, can you please state your address on the record? That's okay.
Joyce Ludke, 714 Burke Street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Miss Judith Miller, please.
Judith Miller, 903 Kickbush Street, Wausau. I continue Mr. Lester's letter. There has been limited soil sampling for dioxin in the neighborhood. There have been 4 separate sampling efforts in this neighborhood. One of these efforts was paid for by the local community group Citizens for an Environmentally Safe Thomas Street Environment, and one was paid for by the City of Wausau. The results of all 4 sampling groups are summarized in Table 1 of the Wisconsin DHS letter report on page 8. This table shows that the concentration of dioxin found in soil in a number of samples collected from the Thomas Street neighborhood exceeds the U.S. EPA regional screening level, or RSL, for dioxin in soil. Several of these samples also exceed the cleanup level set by the U.S. EPA at the Escambia Superfund site in Pensacola, Florida. 2 of the 3 2006 samples had the highest concentrations found among all sampling groups, with the highest level being 105.65 parts per trillion. The 2 highest concentrations exceeded the EPA RSL of 4.8 parts per trillion and Escambia Superfund cleanup goal of 30 parts per trillion. 3 of the 9 2008 samples exceeded the EPA RSL. The highest level found in 2008 was 46.10 parts per trillion. None of the 2018 sample results exceeded the Superfund cleanup level in Florida, though the highest level found, 15.44 parts per trillion, did exceed the EPA regional screening level for dioxin in soil. Overall, 5 out of 16, or 31%, of the samples exceed the dioxin concentrations used as a cleanup level for the Escambia Superfund site in Pensacola, Florida. Superfund sites represent some of the nation's most contaminated land, and no residential area should be built on soil containing more dioxin than a federal Superfund site, especially for such a toxic chemical as dioxin.
Thank you. Mr. Jerry Brewer.
Jerry Brewer. I reside at 503 3rd Street, Wausau. Continuing the report, the 2017 samples collected for the city of Wausau were taken from 6 locations in the Thomas Street construction limits. Unfortunately, these samples were analyzed using non-conventional analytical procedures and cannot be compared to the results of the other sample groups. The point here is that the dioxin levels found in several samples taken in the neighborhood exceed the U.S. EPA screening levels for dioxin in soils and levels used to clean up the federal Superfund sites. While different scientists can disagree about what numbers mean, there can be no doubt that the concentrations of dioxin found in the soil raise a red flag of concern and require further action and evaluation. The reason screen levels are set is to identify levels of concern that require follow-up. In this case, the Wisconsin DHS should conduct additional testing in the Thomas Street neighborhood that will accurately define the extent of dioxin contamination in this area. The additional testing should include surface soil samples, which represent a direct contact route of exposure. None of the current soil samples were collected from surface soil. All of the current samples are subsurface soil samples. Once sufficient tests have been conducted, the risks posed to the residents who live in the community can be evaluated. I'd like to point out that is an open area yet. It is inappropriate to evaluate the public health risks using the limited sampling data that is currently available and to evaluate only the non-cancer risks when the primary toxic effect posed by the exposure to dioxin is the risk of developing cancer. There are additional weaknesses and limitations with the non-cancer risk assessment calculations and exposure estimates made by the Wisconsin DHS. These limitations result in an underestimate of the non-cancer risks posed by exposure to dioxin in soil. These weaknesses include not calculating a full-time exposure, 70 years versus 30 years, assuming the maximum hand-to-mouth soil ingestion rate of 200 milligrams per day, the failure to include inhalation as a route to exposure, and inconsistently using worst-case assumptions in calculating the non-risk or non-cancer risk estimates, resulting in an underestimate of the potential non-cancer risk posed by exposure to dioxin in the soil. While these limitations led to an underestimate of the non-cancer risk posed by the exposure to dioxin in the soil, they pale in comparison to the failure to consider the cancer risks posed by exposure to dioxin. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was 3 minutes to the second.
Mrs. Rita Paco, please. And if you could list your address real quick,
Yes.
please. Thank you.
Rita Paco, 1310 Maple Hill Road, Wausau. In summary and conclusion, the risk calculations and analysis conducted by the Wisconsin DHS is inadequate and incomplete because it failed to consider the cancer risk posed by exposure to dioxin in soil. The Wisconsin DHS inconsistently applied worst-case scenario assumptions in calculating non-cancer risk estimates for dioxin in soil. The best example of this is the use of the second highest concentration of dioxin in soil among the samples considered instead of the highest concentration. No explanation for why they chose to do this, even though the Wisconsin DHS was calculating a worst-case analysis. The levels of dioxin found in 5 of 16, 31%, samples taken from the neighborhood soil exceed US EPA screening levels for dioxin in soil and levels used to clean up a federal Superfund site. There is insufficient sample data for dioxin in soil in the Thomas Street neighborhood to properly determine the extent of dioxin contamination in the neighborhood. Wisconsin DHS should conduct additional testing in the Thomas Street neighborhood in order to define the extent of dioxin contamination in the area. Once sufficient tests have been conducted, The risk posed to the residents who live in this community can be evaluated. It is inappropriate to evaluate the public health risk using the limited sampling data that is currently available and to evaluate only the non-cancer risks when the primary toxic effect posed by exposure to dioxin is the risk of developing cancer. I hope these comments are helpful. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or need any additional information. Sincerely, Stephen Lester, Science Director. And that being said, I want you, the City Council members, to know that we appreciate the tough job that you have. It is not easy, and many times we citizens don't always show our gratitude for the many hours that you put in. But, and here it comes, for years, previous city councils have shoved this pollution problem under the rug. They have sold the city's soul to corporate interests and money. Today, we expect you, as our representatives, to stand firm to protect our Wausonian citizens and District 3 Council member. You are a product of Wausau and live very near this mess. Are you going to stand with your constituents along Thomas Street and adjacent to it? You are their direct representative. Please step up. And to all members of the City Council, do what is right for our city and for us citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, in regards in front of all of you this evening from Amy Leonoff, she had sent her comments regarding the proposal for a religious display on the 400 block. You have copies of that. We have it for copies on the record. At this time, that ends public comment. Mrs. Tao.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to take a couple minutes. I know all of you have had a really long evening. Those on the Finance Committee, I promise it's under 2 minutes. In the recent municipality publication, it honored and remembered a lifelong trailblazer, the late Milwaukee alderperson Vel Phillips, who recently passed away. She was widely recognized for her unwavering voice for change and equality. She was often a lonely warrior who often broke barriers, was the first in many, and an African American to be elected for the first time to the Milwaukee Common Council. Many embraced her first in her passion, and especially her passion for a community of prosperity. I look to the mayor, the council president, and the entire city council collectively to develop a process and a plan and to provide resources to restore the confidence in how we move forward together. In closing, our process and procedures and how we operate in closed session should be reviewed and understood by all council members and city staff. We should create a safe space where all perspectives are welcomed and valued, even if it differs from your own point of view. We should find a way to seek to understand one another. Therefore, I regret to share with all of you that I will not be joining you in closed sessions moving forward, and I hope that we will find a common ground to have a positive working environment where I would be comfortable and invited back in to join all of you in closed sessions going forward. Thank you for the time, Mr. Mayor.
Moving on to the consent agenda, starting with file number 18-1001 from the council, the minutes of the previous meeting dated October 23rd of this year, and ending with file number 18-11-0 from the Public Health and Safety and Ordinance creating section 5.64.036 for drive-up sales. Entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda. Motion by Mr. Neal, second by Mr. Peckham.
Begin voting, please. Motion passed unanimously.
Moving on to the resolutions and ordinances, right off the bat, Mr. Peckham, and I'm going to ask if he wants to make this into a motion, for file number 18-1111 from the Human Resources in regards to resolution approving the social media policy. He has asked that we have this postpone until December 11th. Would you like to make that an motion? And then I'm going to have to get a second for that to happen.
I would like that to happen, Your Honor. I will confess that I don't look at the agendas for every city committee. The ones that I'm on, I don't know what's going on with them sometimes until the stuff gets here. And I was very pleased, however, to see a 6-page social media proposal, a write-up that was developed apparently over a period of months by a committee that I didn't know existed. And so I think that the public, this is a big enough deal, so the public should have an opportunity to look at this stuff and review it and offer their comments before we vote on it. So I would ask that it be put on the agenda for December 11th and that the city make some effort to give it a public airing and just get more. I think it's going to really look like we're just shoving this thing through if we vote on it tonight. So give it another month, ask some people about it. I think it is an improvement over where we're at. I think that things have improved on our social media front in the last 2 years, and so we're going in the right direction, and I think we can just make sure we are, and we get some public opportunity to comment on it as we go. Thank you.
Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Neal. All those in favor, go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. So you were voting on to postpone this item, approving the social media policy until our next council meeting, which is December 11th, 2018.
Not the next one, second after we're in December.
The first meeting in December. Thank you. You may begin voting. I think that was wishful thinking. Mr. Smith, I didn't get to your vote yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you want to, excuse me, I'm sorry, no? Yeah, okay, that motion has passed unanimously.
Moving back to the beginning of the resolutions and ordinances, file number 18-1103, mayor's appointments, there are none at this time. And then file number 18-1109 from the Finance Committee, a public hearing for proposed 2019 City of Wausau budget and fee schedule. I'll announce it for 3 times. If anybody would like to come forward and speak on this matter. Would anybody like to come forward and speak on the budget? And one more time, anybody like to come forward and speak on the budget? Okay, seeing as how nobody wants to come. Did you want to give it? No? Okay. We will be discussing this and hopefully approving it on November 27th in 2 weeks. File number 18-1108 from both Parks and Rec and the Finance. Parks and Rec, option number 1, a resolution approving free swimming days at the Wausau area pools. This was approved by them 3-1. Take these separately, though.
We do need to address this, if I may,
Yeah, I was
sir.
about to say.
This is something that we've had in the past, and it does get quite confusing for everybody on the council. So we wanted to do some explaining for this. The Park and Rec Committee does offer option 1 for this free swimming days at the Wausau pools. As the mayor had said, it was approved 3-1. That's option 1. There is a secondary option that was approved by the Finance Committee coming forth with the same item. It was approved 5-0. In the past, we have done quite confusing where we had the first item listed. If the council didn't like that, they voted it down, and then we addressed the second item. If the council wanted the first item and they voted for it, the second item was not applicable any further. If I'm understanding correctly, we chose this time to make it 1 item. And, well, okay. Mr. Rasmussen. I did
Thank
my
you.
best.
I want to delve into an explanation a little bit because we exercised this one in 2 committees. This made it onto the docket in Finance because it has budgetary implications. So we invited Parks Director Jamie Polly and our pool manager into Karen Powers in to talk to us about pool management and about their experience with the 2018 free swim days. And what we found, or what we learned, and if you read the minutes from those meetings, the staff indicated that, with the exception of the very first pool day, that their attendance was not dramatically increased over what it would have been had the pool not been free. And so the Finance Committee then, in discussing this matter, recognized that not only does the city now have 3 unique pool offerings, they're now flagship facilities, all 3 have been rebuilt. All 3 of them are already priced more competitively than all of our competing municipalities' swimming facilities. Also, in the interest of making pools affordable for those who can't afford them, there is a pool of money available already within the existing structure to help people with reduction in the cost of a summer pool pass. And whether that's individuals or families, they already can get help in reducing their cost to swim. Also, we talked with them about the management of free pool days, because there's some interest on their part of ramping up their advertising, doing some different things at the pool to ramp up the experiences, and maybe some special days where there's certain themes. And all of those things take funds to do, to mix up the experience for the pool users. And so, since all 3 pools offer things for different age demographics and they're all a little bit unique, they do want to mix up that experience a little bit, but it's hard to do that without money. Now, the funds, their operating budget already operates at somewhat of a loss. We don't do the pools for profit, but we do make some money off of them because we have a $9 million debt to pay for getting those pools out there. And so what we talked about in the Finance Committee was that we still want to offer some free swim opportunities, but we were looking for a more pragmatic approach. Rather than offering so many free days and on a rotating basis, we thought that it would be fiscally responsible to offer a free day at the beginning of the season to generate interest, and a free day toward the end of the season. And the pool staff decided that the very last day isn't actually the best day because they have so many things to prepare for with closing out the season. They'd like to do it the last week, but likely not the last day. And they did actually support the idea of being able to offer some free swim opportunities during the season, but not cyclical, the same day every week, every Sunday, every Thursday, whatever, because ramp up the costs, and they find that they're not attracting people who weren't coming anyway. And so they supported the idea that if there's going to be free swim opportunities, that they as a management team be able to figure out when the best time is to have those days so that they can match them to an experience occurring at the facility that mixes up the activity a little bit. And historically, they know roughly when their low utilization days are, when it's easiest for them as a staff to accommodate a free day. And some of these things are also weather dependent, but it made sense for them to be able to, they who manage the pools, to be able to articulate when free days occur. That said, we looked for a more conservative approach. We also discussed the idea of some sponsorship opportunities with private sector businesses so that the private sector can be given a chance to host an event at a pool and, perhaps market their own facility and have that opportunity where the free swim opportunity is still sponsored by someone other than the taxpayers of the city of Wausau. And so as we discussed that opportunity, we were looking for a way that we could offer still some free swim, just not as much free swim, and look for a way that the staff can secure some of those sponsorships before they start advertising the pools in the spring. And they were willing to make that effort, and last year they already had one sponsor for one of those days. So as we talked it through in finance, it seemed that we could take a little more conservative approach than what Park and Rec approved and still get where we want to go, and see if we could get some positive results from that.
Mr. Peckham? Yes, I'll point out. Yeah, I'm going to get a motion first, but Mr. Peckham needs to speak. So go ahead, sir. Excuse me, Mr. Smith.
Nope, it is Mr. Peckham.
Forgive me.
I could give you a motion if you want to.
I'm asking, we should have a motion in a second as we continue this discussion. So if you would.
And then can I speak?
Sure.
If you get a second.
Okay. For purpose of discussion, and I think we might amend even this, members of the Park and Rec, but for purpose of discussion, I would move that we adopt the Park and Rec option. I believe that's option 1.
Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Neal.
Okay, now his lights on.
Now, Mr. Peckham.
Thank you. I was out of town for this meeting. It was ably chaired by Mr. Neal, and I would have voted with the majority when that proposal was formed. And I don't want to belabor things that you've already heard, but I do think that one of the primary benefits of being able to offer those free Sundays is the ability of entire families to enjoy some hours, an hour or some hours at the pool. And instead of having mom or dad drop the kids off at the gate and give them $2 or whatever to get in, they can go in with them. And I really enjoy the sight of parents having fun with their kids and their kids seeing the parents yuck it up and act like kids a little bit. So that was one of the big virtues of that proposal that I saw. I think we can make this happen. I think that we did have a very productive discussion with Lisa, the mayor, Ms. Polly, and Karen Powers, and I think there are some really good other ideas coming down the pike, but I'd like to see us stick with the free Sundays that we could. And the advantage of doing it that way would be to get the word out there from day one when the schedules go out and let people know this is going to happen, because the publicity, we did push it a little bit, but people didn't know about the subsequent days as well as they could have, so there was a big splash, so to speak, on that first day, and it kind of petered out after that. But I would go for it, so thank you.
Before we carry on further, and my sincerest apologies, folks, we got a big agenda tonight. I've got people leaving here at 8 o'clock. Please, if we can, limit our comments. I ask you politely and respectfully, but we've got a lot to get done tonight. Mr. Neal.
Thank you. Be very brief, Mr. Mayor. I do support option 1. I did second it, although I do want to move to amend it to make it a little bit more conservative. In our discussion, there was talk, although it's not reflected in the vote, of switching from a free Wednesday to a free Thursday. Rather than having free Wednesday and Thursday, I propose that we switch to Thursday. I like having a schedule that is in place that people can plan forward to and know about, and it's easier to promote that way rather than kind of changing free days as you go along. I also, in the meeting, stressed that I want to have this on schedule, but I also want to intensify our search for public support, private sector support in the way of sponsorships, and I think that can help alleviate some of the financial concerns. Because right now the temperature outside is about 12 degrees, and we have time to garner some support for this. So I'll leave it at that, and I'm moving to amend option 1 to include only Thursday, not Wednesday and Thursday.
Is there a second for this amendment? Okay, so the second was by Herbst for this amendment. I forgot all my parliamentary training here. We vote on the amendment first, or do we let these
We
people
vote on the
continue?
amendment first.
Thank you. So we do have a motion by Neal, second by Herbst to amend the option 1, which was presented by the Parks and Recreation Committee, to include only Thursdays, not Wednesdays and Thursdays. Oops, excuse me.
Only Thursdays, not Wednesdays.
Only Thursdays, not Wednesdays and Thursdays. So Ms. Rasmussen and Ms. Tao, if you could turn your lights off, I can't take a vote with those on. All right, thank you. You may begin voting. And Mr. Smith, there we go. Okay, that motion to amend has passed. We do have two more people that wanted to address the issue of the main item. So we
Mrs.
have
Tao?
Ms. Tao next.
Okay, I'll be really quick. Before I sat down, before the council meeting started, I had a conversation with Phil Solomoni about which options he preferred. And he said neither one. He liked the option to have free for the entire week. And I just want to share with all of you some perspective in under 30 seconds that being on the school board, we always hear about, lack of parent engagement, children with very high social and emotional behaviors. And we're starting to see a trend across our school district, and it's probably because some of these children come from very broken homes, homes without parents, homes where they're being parented by their grandparents or whichever adult is available that's next of kin. I want you all to understand that we have parts of our community that is very unwealthy, living in poverty and living in economic conditions where children do not have the opportunity to enjoy themselves, to be with family. And if we really want to increase parent or family engagement, I would ask all of you and encourage you to put yourselves in that position, and maybe you have the opportunity to provide for your children, your grandchildren, your nieces and your nephews, but there's a big, huge population in our community that does not have that opportunity at all. With that, I would support the first motion, which was to have Wednesday, Thursday, and the first day being free, and the every Sunday at a different location. And I believe that's what Council Member Peckham had initially sought a motion for. Thank you.
Mrs. Rasmussen?
Thank you. Part of the discussion we had in finance was a concern that a good source of the pool revenue for their operating comes from season pass sales. And we believe that season pass sales will be undermined the more free opportunities there are. So people will utilize the free day and not utilize the fee day. And so this actually, I think, will become self-perpetuating in the fact that not only are we now giving away our brand-new facilities and then still paying the debt for them, but I think you're going to see an issue where if you're going to have rotating free days, you're going to see a lack of utilization on the days where you charge, and you're going to see a reduction in annual pass sales. And we had a concern about that in finance, which is why we tried a more pragmatic approach to still offer some opportunities for those who need them, but to not make it as regular and routine. So I will not support this. Thank you.
Okay, so to vote on option 1 as amended on council floor. Is everyone understanding what we're voting on? Okay. Yep.
So what happens to the first motion? So the amended motion is what we're going to be voting on, and that's it?
No, right now it's the option 1 as amended, because that did pass 7-4.
Okay.
All right, everyone's got it? Okay, and this original motion was first by Peckham, second by Neal, and this is the as amended original motion. You may begin voting. That motion has passed 6-5.
File number 02-1005, a resolution of the Economic Development Committee approving the sale of remnant parcels number 3 and number 4 on West Thomas Street. Committee action approved 5-0. The fiscal impact will be $500. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Neal. Do I have a second? By Ms. Herbst.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once. This was the remnant parcels 3 and 4, correct?
Correct.
Motion by Neal and second by Herbst?
Herbst.
Thank you. Okay, you may begin voting. That motion has passed 10-1.
File number 18-1113, a resolution of the Economic Development Committee approving the sale of 2115, 2004, 2005, and 2001 Sherman Street and 902 South 21st Avenue to Central Wisconsin Real Estate or their assignee for the construction of the Sherman Street Bungalows project. Committee action approved 3-2. The fiscal impact will be $3,000. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Neal, second by Mrs. Rasmussen. Mr. Gisselman.
I voted against this. I think that this is really putting too much stress on the neighborhood. I think that these buildings will be going into really lots that really aren't meant to have these types of housing. I think that we're setting aside some setbacks that are according to the zoning. And I know that we're under, would like to go on, but I'm just trying to keep this somewhat quick, but I think that it's really, they just don't, I don't think that the way the builders are, I don't think it fits in the neighborhood, and thus I voted against it, and I will continue to vote against it.
Thank you, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very briefly, I joined Mr. Gisselman as a no vote at the ED committee meeting. Subsequently, and my main reason was because I was not happy with the renderings, which were woefully uninformative as far as I was concerned. I have since seen some very detailed overviews of the properties and their positioning of driveways off of Thomas Street on the side streets. And I've driven around and looked at the lots, and I feel they're fine, and I will support this.
Mrs. Rasmussen.
Thank you. I did support this in the ED committee, partly because as a city, we need to know and learn how to grow in a dense urban setting. And, you know, not every parcel is going to have a huge lot, and not every parcel is going to have a huge yard. And I think we need to have a mix of housing offerings for people who maybe don't want those things to still have a new structure to call their own. And so these bungalows, I think, even though they're dense, they're remnant parcels, and sometimes remnant parcels are hard to build on. They produce tax base, and they will create a housing offering that not everyone may want, but other people may appreciate. And I think that we can manage them there. Right now, they're being maintained by the city, and they're paying no property tax because they're remnants. So this puts those parcels back on the tax roll for some revenue.
Begin voting, please. That motion has passed 8-3. Yep. Sorry, that motion has passed 8-3.
File number 021005, resolution of the Finance Committee approving jurisdictional offer process to owner of 242 East Thomas Street. Committee action approved 5-0. Fiscal impact, if final offer is not accepted, $166,800. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mrs. Rasmussen, second by Mr. Nutting.
Begin voting, please. That motion has passed 10-1.
And again, file number 18-111 was decided. We will be discussing that on December 11th. Moving on to file number 18-1110, a resolution of the Park and Recreation Committee approving the formation of the Dog Park Committee. Committee action approved 5-0. The fiscal impact will be none. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Peckham. Do I have a second? By Mrs. Tile. Mrs. Rasmussen.
Thank you. I'd like to amend this motion to add the requirement that the committee members all be City of Wausau residents. Our neighboring municipalities all have created and open dog parks, but I think a facility that's paid for and owned by our residents should be designed and coordinated by our residents. So I would like to see the requirement that anyone participating on this committee as citizen members be city residents. If I could get a second.
Do I have a second on that? Second by Mr. Smith.
One moment, please. All committee members must be citizens of the City of Wausau of the Dog Park
Correct.
Committee. Okay. Okay. We have a motion to amend the dog park resolution. Motion by Rasmussen, second by Smith. You may begin voting. That motion has passed 10-1. Now we can vote on the original item. Okay. And this is as amended on council floor. You may begin voting. That motion has passed unanimously.
File number 95-0313, a resolution of the Park and Recreation Committee amending the City of Wausau events policy and procedures and the 400 block policy and reservation form regarding the lengths of rental periods and static displays, and to include a disclaimer. Committee action approved 5-0. The fiscal impact is a potential additional revenue of $1,000 per year. Entertain motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Neal. Do I have a second? By Ms. Herbst. Mr. Neal.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Contrary to some of the discussion that we've been hearing, the overriding, I thought, concern at our meeting was not the legalities or illegalities that might come into play with regards to constitutional rights and whatnot. It came down to the fact that the city does not have a policy to rent out display space in our parks. And that we did not want to go down that road, because then it became, really open season for anybody and everybody who might want to rent display space in our parks for commercial reasons, for political reasons, for religious reasons, for whatever reasons you can possibly imagine. And we did not want to do that in our parks, which are not designed to be billboards. So that's why I think we voted our way.
Thank you, Mrs. Rasmussen.
I guess if we could just get clarification, I think there's been a lot of folks who support not allowing static displays in parks at all. Where did you come out as a committee on static displays? I can understand amending the event policy to get events applied for properly, but where you fell on this after the legal research that I read today, does your proposal allow or not allow static displays?
I can address that. Yeah, we pretty much covered that, but what we're talking about is renting out space. Now, you could say the holiday tree in the 400 block is a static display, if you will. And some say that the snow sled, slide at 400 block that's left down there until it melts is a static display. Neither of those are rented out to private parties, for them to communicate whatever it is they want to communicate. So that's what we wanted to keep in mind. We didn't want to turn, let's say, the stage of the 400 block into an all year long space that's rentable to anybody. As Mr. Smith said, eat at Joe's, or every group, organization, or political person or cause can just take turns putting their stuff up there, and we just don't want to go down that road in our parks.
Mr. Peckham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, what I came out of that meeting with was that the differentiation that we were making had nothing to do with the message of the proposed display. It was that this space is for events and performances, and when the city staff, the attorney, started working on this, trying to make sure that we were on top of this, they were looking at the possibility of a live nativity scene and prepared for a request to do that, but it turned out that Mr. Straub and his associates wanted just set up a display that would be for 6 weeks on the stage, and we all agreed that the block, as Mr. Neal has said, is not for displays, it's for events and performances. So if they had come to us and wanted to put on a live nativity scene, that would have been acceptable. But they came with an inert display that would have no human activity or performance value, so we said no.
You may begin voting, please. That motion has passed unanimously.
File number 18-1105, an ordinance of the Plan Commission rezoning 1300 Cleveland Avenue from an M2 General Industrial District to an R4 General Residence District. Committee action approved 7-0. Fiscal impact will be none. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Peckham, second by Ms. Herbst. Mrs. Towle.
This question is probably for Christian Schock, if he's still in the audience. I see him. Is there a potential opportunity to develop this space? I guess I should rephrase that. Are there proposals or opportunities that have been knocked at your door about potential opportunities to develop the space, therefore the rezoning to general residence?
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before. Obviously, it's a parcel that we're looking at. We've had some discussion with some potential interested parties, and so we wanted to have the public process to discuss the appropriate type of use that would be amenable to the neighborhood and to the city as a whole. And so that's why we went through the rezoning process. And I think if this is, if you do take action on this, we would likely bring an RFP to the ED committee in the coming months, and then release an RFP and solicit, public proposals for that parcel in the future.
Just one more question. Maybe you might not be able to answer this, but was that part of that area ever tested for topsoil tested for the dioxin stuff? Because I know it's close by.
I don't think I can answer that, but
Eric?
The property has, we do have a lengthy environmental file from when we acquired the site. And there has been mitigation or efforts, undertaken at that site in the past.
I haven't seen any dioxin testing from that site.
So we haven't conducted any kind of dioxin testing in that area specifically?
Correct. None that I've seen.
Okay. Thanks, Christian. Thanks, Eric.
Mr. Gisselman?
Well, just following up, so there are environmental reports. I guess I was not aware of that, but there are environmental reports. I think the key word was dioxin, but I think there are other contaminants that we may have to be fretting about. I'm not sure if we have those environmental reports, fine. I think that might be necessary as we go forward.
Yeah, as we discussed, I think you asked that question of Planning Commission. We said that there, had been testing done from our understanding, or we've now have the file. It was an old file. Again, all of this would be reviewed during the, either before the release of the RFP and then in your consideration of accepting any of those proposals. Again, the use of the proposals might be wildly different. We'll let that process take place.
Mrs. Rasmussen?
Thank you. I actually support this proposal, and not so much to think that, eventually we would subdivide it and people would live there or whatever, but we in Wausau have some either grandfathered zoning classes or land uses that don't necessarily dovetail well with neighborhoods. And, nowadays, if the Plan Commission would look at a proposal to have industrial zoning right next to a neighborhood, they'd likely deny it. But, back in the day, a lot of these sites got approved and they got grandfathered, and so we do have some industrial uses that are too close to neighborhoods, and so rezoning this actually restricts the things that parcel could ever be used for. So I think taking this out of an industrial class, regardless of what it becomes, is a smart move, because industrial is one of the broadest zoning classes we have, where people can do almost anything on the site, whether it disrupts the neighborhood adjacent or not. And so I think we should at least get the industrial class off and then figure out through the proposals what the future use should be.
Okay, we have a motion by Peckham, second by Herbst. You can vote. Motion passed unanimously.
File number 18-1106, an ordinance of the Plan Commission, rezoning 2001, 2005, 2115 Sherman Street and 902 South 21st Avenue from an R2 single-family residence district to a UDD, Unified Development District, and approving the general development plan to allow for residential homes. Committee action approved 7-0. The fiscal impact will be none. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Nutting. Do I have a second? By Ms. Kalbach. Mr. Gisselman.
Yes, just I voted against this and this whole scenario here, basically because of the same reasons before. I just don't think these buildings will fit within the neighborhood, and I thank you.
Okay, you may begin voting. Motion passed by 8 to 3.
File number 18-1106, a resolution of the Plan Commission approving the precise implementation plans at 2001, 2005, and 2115 Sherman Street and 902 South 21st Avenue to allow for single-family residential homes in a UDD, Unified Development District. Committee action approved 4 to 2. The fiscal impact will be none. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Nutting, second by Mr. Smith.
Begin voting, please. Motion passed 8 to 3.
At this time, I'll entertain a motion to suspend the rule of number 1, paragraph D of the transmission of committee business to council for the items marked pending committee action. A 2/3 vote is required. Motion by Mr. Neal, thank you. Do I have a second by Mr. Smith?
Begin voting. Motion passed unanimously.
File number 17-1109, a resolution of the Finance Committee authorizing the 2018 annual budget adjustment. Committee action approved 5 to 0. Fiscal impact will be none. Housekeeping. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mrs. Rasmussen, second by Mr. Nutting.
Begin voting. Motion passed unanimously.
And then just to let you folks know, there was a presentation given earlier tonight at Finance by Mr. Phil Cason. He's our advisor with Ehlers, and if he's got any questions, or if any of you have any questions, he's available. But in the meantime, I'll move forward to file number 18-1007, a resolution of the Finance Committee authorizing the issuance and sale of $5,480,000 for general obligation promissory notes, Series 2018A. Committee action approved 5 to 0. The fiscal impact will be $776,444 worth of interest. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mrs. Tao. Do I have a second? By Mrs. Rasmussen. I guess I'll give it to you.
Begin voting, please. Motion passed unanimously.
File number 18-1008, a resolution also of the Finance Committee tonight, authorizing the issuance and sale of $5,055,000 for the Water System and Sewer System Revenue Bond Anticipation Notes, Series 2018B. Committee action approved 5 to 0. The fiscal impact will be $200,936 of interest payable by the utility. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mr. Nutting, second by Ms. Herbst.
Begin voting. Motion passed unanimously.
File number 18-1009, a resolution of the Finance Committee authorizing the issuance of $8,010,000. That number had been changed from 15 to 10,000 at the Finance meeting. Taxable general obligation promissory notes and the issuance and sale of $8,010,000 taxable note anticipation notes, Series 2018C, and anticipation thereof. Committee action approved 4 to 1. The fiscal impact will be $1,195,192 of interest. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Ms. Kalbach, second by Mr. Martins.
Begin voting. Motion passed 9 to 2.
File number 18-1112, a resolution of the Finance Committee approving legislation resolution urging the FCC to continue to require cable operators and other video providers to provide channel space and transmission of local PEG access channels at no charge to municipalities. Committee action approved 5 to 0. The fiscal impact will be none. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Mrs. Rasmussen, second by Ms. McElhaney.
Begin voting. That motion passed unanimously.
And file number 16-1110, a joint resolution of the Finance Committee and the Human Resources Committee authorizing the Wausau Police Department to accept the Wisconsin Department of Justice a 2019 B Patrol grant of $121,434 to add 2 additional full-time employee police officers to the police department roster and establish a 2019 budget. Committee Action, Finance Committee approved 5-0. The HR Committee approved 4-0. The fiscal impact will be $182,548 annually, plus inflationary increases. Entertain a motion to accept. Motion by Ms. Herbst, second by Mr. Martins. Mrs. Rasmussen.
Thank you. With the fiscal impact statement on this resolution, it's important to recognize that the city match for the grant is approximately $60,000, 30 of which to come from overtime, 30 of which to come from animal control for the 2019 budget. The rest of it is grant funded.
Mr. Peckham.
Far be it for me to delay this, but I was wondering did we do anything special to qualify for this, or how did we earn this grant?
Well, we scored in the top 10 higher crime rate. We have a lot of crime. I guess if you want to bring the chief up, that was...
Actually, I got some good news coming tomorrow, but we'll wait on that. We'll temper the good with the bad. So we have Chief Bliven with us from the police department. If you could explain for everybody, please, sir. Thank you.
The grant was just like Mr. Rasmussen indicated. They looked at the cities that have populations over 25,000, and then they ranked those in order of crime rate, and we're in the top 10. So as a result of that, we are eligible for this grant.
Okay. Begin, whoops, excuse me.
Mr. Gisselman.
Well, is that any specific type, or is that violent? Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, it's violent crime.
Then
Which
do we have a policy, or how you perceive moving ahead with, especially, I guess the citizens are, hearing about violent crime, top 10 in Wisconsin. I think that's something to be concerned about, and how the police department's going to move forward with that.
Yeah, I agree that it is something to be concerned about. I think if you look at over the last 4 years, the number of vacant positions we've had as a police department, we haven't had the ability to provide as much policing as we would like. But I also think, our ability to partner with social service agencies, North Central Healthcare, to provide a better service to people, I think will help in the future. But I think having a full staff of police officers will help in being able to do our best to deter that crime as well.
All right, with no other questions, you may begin voting. That motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, Chief. And at this time, I'll open up to anybody in the general public that would like to come forward and speak on a matter. Now is your chance. Again, would anybody like to come forward and speak on a matter facing anything? I'll listen. And one more time, anybody would like to come forward and speak on a matter? Mr. Peckham.
Sorry. I'm wondering if you wanted to circle back and handle the appointments. I think we skipped over the appointment of Mr. Shannon to the Community Development Advisory Committee. It was in the packet with his bio or resume, et cetera.
I missed that one too. There it is.
Right off the bat.
My apologies, it was not in my packet.
I would move to approve the appointments this evening.
But the good news is...
I missed that too.
Good news is, as always, there's a biography for all of you to read, so...
Very good.
My apologies.
So we have a motion by Mr. Peckham to accept the mayor's appointments as presented. Is there a second? Mr. Neal, you may begin voting. Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you for pointing that out, Pat. Would anybody else like to come forward to speak? Okay, at that time, we'll close the public comment and suggestions. And at this time, we have two different closed sessions to be read and voted upon before we go into closed session. Can I ask somebody to volunteer to read the first one, please?
I'll read the first one.
Thank you, Mrs. Rasmussen.
I'll make a motion that we go into closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.85 paragraph 1 sub G for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel regarding pending tax litigation involving Aspirus Wausau Hospital Incorporated, case number 17 CV 445 and 17 CV 672.
Is there a second?
Second by Mr. Neal.
Begin voting, please. Motion has passed 10-1.
And if I could have a volunteer for the second closed session, please.
I'll do it.
Mr. Neal.
I move
Thank you.
that we go to closed session pursuant to 19.85 sub 1 sub E of the Wisconsin statutes for deliberating or negotiating the purchase of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. And pursuant to Wisconsin statutes section 19.85 sub 1 sub G, for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel regarding River Life Villages Phase 1 and the proposals received for the River Life area.
Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Smith. Thank you.
Begin voting. That motion has passed 10-1.
And we will be reconvening back into open session to go over the possibilities of one or the other. In the meantime, with the exception of Mr. Schock, Mrs. Grote, Mrs. Jacobson, Ms. Riella, all other city staff are excused for the evening unless you'd like to come back and join us. So, thank you, everybody. Have a great night. We will be back. Okay, folks, we're reconvened back in an open session. And if I could I take a motion as far as what was discussed?
Yep,
Mrs.
Mr. Mayor,
Rasmussen?
with regard to the Aspirus Hospital legal item, I will make a motion that we accept the settlement offer for the case that's at hand for $270,000.
Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Nutting. All those in favor?
Begin voting, please. That motion has passed 10-0, and just for the record, Ms. Tao did leave, and she's not voting. Just so you know what's 10-0.
If there's nothing else to come forward before the council tonight, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, you all want to stay. How nice. All right. That's what I like, that gumption, and let's make it work. Seriously, do I have one by Mr. Nutting? Do I have a second by Mr. Smith?
And begin voting, please. Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience tonight. Have a great evening. Thank you.